So now, without further ado, let me allow me to welcome our very distinguished and host of tonight's session, Mr. Sai Satish. Sai Satish is an executive coach, senior faculty at the Institute of Product Leadership, and was most recently senior director of product management at Oracle. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Sai Satish, as we are absolutely thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Kindly take this session forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayant. Good evening, everyone. Jayant, could you enable the video to me? I'm not able to turn it on. So again, looks
Just
like...
Just a moment, Sai, I will do that.
Yeah, it looks like Saturday evening is not a great time to have a very heavy, although hopefully interesting discussion on the data science careers part. But, I see several folks joining on other streams as well. Apparently, this is also live streamed on other platforms, including LinkedIn Live and also Facebook and Twitter. So I'll be mostly facilitating the conversation here with Dr. Olas. So let me introduce you to Dr. Olas as soon as we get the videos up and running. So, Jayant, are you able to get that?
We're just doing it, thank you.
Sure. Okay. While we work out those details, again, I want to welcome all of you who have joined on a Saturday evening. The focus of today's conversation mostly is bringing in experts like Dr. Olas to these sessions and help answer some very pertinent and relevant questions that most of us have, especially working professionals. Either you are able to essentially are looking to start a career in data science, or able to look at upskilling yourself in data science, data analytics, business analytics, AI, and ML. These are some of the very hot areas and skills that a lot of people are looking to use them, learn, and apply them in the context of their roles today, right? So you may be coming from different backgrounds, whether you are a business analyst, whether you are a project manager, whether you are a product manager or senior engineering managers, right? So today, having understanding and application of various data skills is becoming absolutely critical, right? So with that context, I think I want to strongly encourage all of you to ask as many questions. This is not a webinar where the speaker is actually going to put some slides and talk about a specific topic, but this is an ask me anything related to career paths, anything related to skills. What are the best skills? What are the right skills to acquire? How do we learn them? And how do we ensure that we actually apply them in the context of your work, right? So with that, let me start introducing you to our guest speaker today, and then we can get going. I already see a couple of questions coming in. Excellent, please keep them coming. So Olas, Dr. Olas Nambiar is, just to make sure, Olas, if you are on the call and you're able to hear me okay?
Yes, Satish, I am.
Are you able to turn on the camera? Now I'm able to, at least, and hopefully you all can see me. There you go. Right,
Hi,
super. Very glad to have you again, Dr. Olas. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, especially in the context of emerging scenario in India, especially in the context of data roles, data scientists, data analysts, and variety, changing landscape, ever-changing landscape, I would say, right? So thanks for joining on a Saturday evening. So for those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Olas and his work, he's a principal director of artificial intelligence at Accenture. He and his team actually are focused on building preemptive solutions for Accenture and their customers. Now, that's a very provocative and also curiosity generating term, preemptive solutions for Accenture and its customers. I'm sure we will learn a little bit more about what those preemptive solutions are, what kind of problems do you solve, for Accenture and your customers as well. And Olas has about 20 plus years of experience in the industry, leading R&D organizations. He's also an accomplished researcher in AI and knowledge management areas. Before Accenture, Olas was Chief Technology Officer at Zensar Technologies. And before that, he was actually an Associate Vice President of Data Science at Myntra. Now, if you're wondering, what does an online fashion retailer like Myntra has to do with data science, I'm sure there are some interesting areas and projects that Olas had led and accomplished. Olas also has a PhD from computer science in computer science from Arizona University. So I'm going to refer to you, Olas, throughout as Dr. Olas. So that's my privilege essentially. Olas also published more than 50 plus research papers, has about 10 plus patents in variety of areas in AI and ML. He's also a distinguished speaker and ACM member. Welcome, Olas. Thank you so much for joining us. So,
my pleasure, Sai.
Yeah, I'd like you to maybe, before we jump into the discussion, I think it'll be useful for us to know a little bit about who our audience is, right? So I think it's, let's see if we can actually launch that poll. Hopefully you can see the poll that's launched. The first question, so folks, whoever has joined on Zoom, I know there are several people on LinkedIn and other streams who may not be able to take this, but it'll be very useful if you can tell us where you come from in the sense of background, experience, and so that we can actually structure this discussion and focus on specific areas that you might get most benefit of, right? So go ahead and tell us. So the first one says you have this many years of work experience, overall work experience, not necessarily in work context, which includes data and data science. So we see 10 plus years, about 50% of them, 5 to 10 years, next 25. So split between 50 and 50, 0 to 10 and 10 plus, right? Excellent. So let me just quickly share those results, and hopefully everybody can see that. Now, let me see if I can launch the second poll again, just to know, what is your work background, right? You're currently in what role in your organization? And the choices that you see is data analyst, business analyst, software engineer, project manager, product manager, and functional leader. I think we can go and add a lot more to the list because looks like this is absolutely critical and important for a variety of roles today, right? Whichever role that you're in. Data literacy and using and applying data skills in the context of either doing your job efficiently or making certain important decision is a super critical skill today, right? So it looks like most of the audience, or 70% of them, come from the data analysts, right? And then you have business analysts and software engineers as well. So when we say functional leaders, I believe we're talking about engineering managers, senior engineering managers, or above, right? Again, right now we're talking about titles, but when we get into our conversation, we'll try our best to avoid these titles. As you know, Olas, titles are very creative in India, right? So, so we will refrain or try to refrain from using that titles. So here's the last poll, a third one, and you are interested, and on a Saturday evening, I'm sure there are many other important things and fun things that you could do, but since you are here, all of you, it'll be good if you can tell us why are you interested in either data science or any of these things, right? Not just data science. And I know some of these terms are kind of muddled right now, messed up, I would say, in the industry. Many people have taken it and used it in very different contexts. So one of the questions that we will ask Olas is also demystifying us, all these terms and the responsibilities that we keep hearing. So super. I think most of them are here to start a data science career, 50% of them, and another 50% of them are looking to either transition to data careers and or use it in the current job, right? Not surprising there. I think there is a lot of interest to know how they can apply these particular areas in that. Great, super. Thank you so much, all of you. So let me start by asking Olas to kind of help us understand and describe the preemptive solutions that you mentioned that you and your team solves for Accenture and its customers, right? So can you help us explain what do we mean by preemptive solutions in what context, right? There are lots of different types of projects that happen. And I'm assuming a lot of these things are solving certain business problems, right, for you and for customers. So what happens in that context, and where does these data science or data analytics or even business analytics come into picture, right? So to you.
Sure, Sai. So I think you picked up a description from my LinkedIn, I guess. It's a preemptive piece. So from an Accenture perspective, I'm part of the Accenture operations team. If you look at other services organizations, they might call it as managed services business, wherein we lift and shift customer operations and run it for many, many years, right? So there is a long-term relationship that we maintain with a client and a customer. Essentially, we are running the business for the customer, right? So in the older days, in like 5-10 years back, when you said managed services, you pretty much thought about some back office work, somebody doing just some grunt work, right? Now that has changed. Once digital has come to forefront, and also now with the pandemic coming in, a lot of customers, a lot of the CDOs, the CIOs, the CTOs, they have realized that you need to have digitization, but you also need to have solutions on top of that, right? You need to have more of automation. I would use the term automation at this point, right? Intelligence it's the next step on automation. So the first step obviously is automation. You want to reduce dependence on human beings as much as possible, not in the sense of taking away human and putting a bot there, but take away the more mundane, repetitive tasks which a bot is very efficient at doing, and make the human do the more intuitive, more thought sort of intelligence involving jobs where there is a decision being made by the human, right? So if I'm simply looking at a screen and then like, okay, it's green, red, green, red, green, red, that doesn't really need the human intelligence, right? You can actually train a bot to say, okay, this is green, this is red, right? Where do you want the human to come in is to say, okay, should I escalate this to my manager, right? Now that is more of a decision that a bot cannot be trained, because the escalation is not unique. There are many situations where escalations can come in, or if I want to shut down the machine and restart it, for instance, right? So you have hundreds of different reasons for which a machine is not working or system is not working, right? So those situations, you obviously need a human to come in and take a judgment call, right? Whereas there is no judgment call involved in typically looking at a screen and saying red and green, right? So that's something you can tell a machine. So my team, as part of operations, what we do is we build these solutions which are essentially automating a significant portion of these roles, in the sense that these more mundane, boring activities, which cannot be automated by RPA. So I'll just differentiate between RPA and what we do. So we are not a robotic automation, process automation team, right? That's like a glorified Excel macro, right? So it has its limitations, right? So irrespective of what the RPA vendors are saying. Now, and scale is a big challenge with RPA, right? So the more number of bots you put, a more number of failure points you generate. Whereas you now shift that process and say, can I bring a more robust automation and engineering process, which is where your statistical modeling and combined with robust software engineering. That's what my team does. So I have a team that looks at advanced AI. I have a team that looks at advanced statistical modeling, and a core software engineering team, and of course, all is connected together by a product management team. So it's an entire sort of product development team, which is surprising that given that we are in a services organization. So within the services organization, we are a product team, right? Our role is to actually build these products which enable Accenture operations to deliver value, higher value at a lower cost to our clients, and also make it more sustainable, right? So if let's say use case, let's say simple use case of invoice processing, right? The customer comes and says, I have 100,000 invoices to process, right, in a year, and you put a few people to do the invoice processing, and then customer does well, is growing, the business is growing, and says from 100,000 becomes 500,000. Now you don't put more people and solve the job, right? That's not the purpose. So what you want to do is from 100,000 to 500,000, it is still the same system. You might just have a little bit more. Maybe instead of one person doing some sort of a judgment or a decision making, maybe two people are doing. But now that's a sustainable business, right? And that's where our solutions are coming in. And when I said preemptive, what we are looking at is we're looking across the business, across finance, right, across procurement, across healthcare, and looking at opportunities to bring these solutions for our clients, right? So first, we obviously have a center of excellence where we build these capabilities and solutions. We test it out, and then once it is, let's say, we do a few POCs, we figure out it works well, then we actually take it and put it into production to clients. So there is a process for building these assets and taking to market, right? So there will be always in my portfolio, there is always scaled assets which have many clients and multiple deployments, and you will have a whole bunch of assets which are essentially showcasing a new technology which is coming in, and it's a continuum, right? You have these great capabilities, but they're probably not ready for market yet because maybe the systems are not ready, the client systems are not ready, the right data is not available, the right systems are not available, and so you have a continuum of systems like that. So what so far has happened is the not so complex systems have actually gone live, right? So if you look at the AI perspective, the more advanced systems take some time, right? So for instance, the more complex the AI, the harder for us to build and run and execute and bring value, right? So it's a process, but I think in the last 3-4 years when I've been doing this now, a lot of AI has seen the market. There is a lot of ROI. So there is success in taking our AI to market.
Super. I think so. I was actually going to ask how is that different from RPA, but you clarified that because that could have been a proper question from a lot of people based on what you described. Now, what you just explained, the types of projects and the reasons why you bring in AI and use that for automation and at scale is not obviously unique to what you're solving, right? Essentially, whether it is in the context of large scale projects that other companies, even services companies are trying to execute for large clients and customers, or even companies that are building products at scale, right? So these are not unique. Would you agree that these are not unique? And of course, the nuances and the contexts are very different. But yeah, right. So how would you describe such kind of a project where it lends very well itself to using these data science and AI techniques?
Sure. So as I explained earlier, right? So if you take any process, any business process, right, and you look at the process, there are several elements in the business process. You have your standard workflows which come into play, and you have certain stages. Let's use computer science. We'll say there are stage changes which will happen, right? You maybe collect some data from your clients, or if you're a B2C business, let's take a B2C business, like you're doing, let's say you are a shared driver sharing business, let's say, right? Like a Uber or Ola or any other, like Grab or anything, right? Now let's say, where are your heavy businesses? One, customer acquisition. The more important one is your driver acquisition, right? So you want to get more and more drivers on board. Now, and all of these businesses have churn. So you have a always on driver onboarding business. When you're onboarding a driver, you don't want to centralize that process. You want to say, I want my driver to onboard from anywhere in the country, right? So now what do you do? And of course, there are regulations behind who can be a driver. So you have to meet the regulations of the country which you are in. And there are certain documents which are required. So now let's say you set up a driver onboarding portal or a mobile app, right? What it does is it brings an interface to you, right? It doesn't solve your problem. It basically is a connection point, right? Now the driver, let's say, is sitting in a small town, wants to be on your platform. The driver will now come in and say, I'm registering, maybe takes a photograph, does the standard KYC process now. And if you're a very successful business, you have people coming all the time onto your portal, right? So the question now is, how can you automate this process? What you want to do is you want to do some background checks on the driver. You want to validate that all the documents that the driver has given are legitimate and belong to the same person, right? So typically people, what they do is they give a driver's license, but they give a school certificate to somebody else, right? So this has to be done or validated. Now, KYC is something that is not unique to driver onboarding, right? KYC is also there in your banking systems, in your insurance, in your healthcare. So I just took KYC as a simple process, right? Now, if you look at traditional automation solutions on KYC, right, nothing can be done because you're dealing with documents. So your RPA is not going to work out because RPA doesn't do any of this, right? RPA is very structured data. You have tables and data around it, you can do it. So what happens is now these documents, somebody is going to scan and send it out. Maybe they'll take a photograph and send it to you, or they have a digital copy and send it to you. You need to first extract all the information and verify. Let's say somebody uploads an Aadhaar, you want to verify with your Aadhaar authority, UAI, UID is saying this is a proper Aadhaar and belongs to this person, right? So you need to have a KYC validation step. So for that, now you need to bring in your optical character recognitions. You bring your OCR engines, right? But OCR engines are just going to digitize this image. They are not going to extract the information from them. So there comes your document or data extraction use case, which again is complex because now I will upload my school certificate from my school, you will upload from your school. So there is no standardization, right? So now that becomes something that a computer vision solutions come in, right? Very simple problem of just validating that this driver is a legal, legitimate driver. The documents are legitimate. It has been issued by a legitimate authority, and all the person is going to do is drive a car. Very simple process, right? And the car also belongs to the guy. This is a simple one, but now technology has come in to actually validate this thing, right? The alternate mechanism would have been you put some person there who will download all these documents, eyeball all of this, verify this. Now, as the number of drivers come, the backlog will increase because either you cannot have a contact center with increasing human beings. You will have a limited capacity. You'll say 20 people will do this business, but suddenly somebody takes leave, or your drivers suddenly increase because of the festival season. You cannot keep up with it, right? So what you really want to do is you don't want human in the loop, and human beings also make mistakes. It's not like humans don't make mistakes, right? So a human cannot sit and validate everything. So if you have a system that at the moment you upload, the system actually looks at all these documents and comes and says, look, let's say your KYC documents are not matching. Can you give some other document? What it does is reduces the gap, right? It reduces the time to closure. Because now system can automatically look at the document and say, look, your document is not scanned properly. Maybe you're not able to extract information, because in the non-automated system, I will upload everything and I'll wait for a week for all this information to come back. Then I will come to know half the information isn't available. I have to upload again. And what happens? I have a competitor. The driver goes to my competition, right? So that's a simple example of where technology comes into play, right? And where AI comes in, where computation comes in, and you can build systems like this, right? So a very simple process, but the idea is you start looking at it and say, can we bring technology to these? Typically, people would not think about it, right? Now, the challenge here is that how do you keep, bring this technology, but keep the cost low? You have to run this at scale. You cannot increase the cost too high. If it is 2x costlier than a human being, you'll still bring a human being, right? So some of those are the business aspects of it when you bring AI. So there is a technology, but then you have to bring the business and make sure it makes business case.
Now that's a wonderful example. I think doing KYC at scale, why it is not feasible and practical to do with the current processes, current mechanisms that you have, manual verification, especially disparate types of information and different formats, right? So, and today you're saying we have the ability, we have the models, we have the technology to actually learn from all this information and do this at scale. And it would be a competitive disadvantage if somebody is not doing that. And that's your key point that you're saying, right? This is a great way of doing it. Now, to do, work on such projects, right? So this is an example projects that you've given, and I'm sure there are so many such projects in every industry that you take, right? Whether it is manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, automotive, insurance, financial services, any of those things. Mm-hmm. One of the challenging things for many people that I've noticed who actually want to know how to use the data science techniques or skills in such projects is first step on defining the problem as a business problem. Mm-hmm. And defining that business problem as a data science problem, right? Meaning not all business problems lend itself very well to the data science projects, right? And vice versa is also true. A lot of people with a lot of enthusiasm, energy, let's use ML, let's use AI in this, pick the wrong type of project, right? So what's your guidance on what to look at and how does one frame the problem or go about framing the problem, number one? Mm-hmm. What kind of abilities, right? Understanding of this particular area. You call it competencies, you call it skills, are required for somebody to be able to frame this business problem as a data science problem?
Yeah. So I would say two things, right? One is every business now is a IT business or a computer science business, right? So and if you look at pandemic, then every business is a health business now because everybody's managing health, right? But so every business today can be digitized, right? Other than actually growing crops, even there you can do some digitization if you want to do. But so the easy answer I would give you is that every business process or a problem can be transformed to, and I will make it simpler, right? We'll make it as a automation problem, right? Can I automate this process, right? Because if you think of it, a lot of these processes have been around for eons, since when industrialization started, and the industrialization assumed machine plus man, right? So the challenge is machines do some of the heavy lifting aspects of it, and then the man comes in. So industrialization itself brought the idea of automation, which is why we went from yoke and cows to actually tractors. So it is fundamental in the fact that any human process can be automated. Now, and your question is legitimate. Does that mean every process can be put into AI? I will give you the answer, right? And it's an analogy my advisor used to use, right? So you can automate the job of a lawyer, but you don't want to automate the job of a plumber, right? It is very hard. The job of a lawyer is easier to automate. You can actually put an AI to do the job of a lawyer because it is a very structured, process-driven, rule-driven. You cannot do outside the rules. So and the reason that is suitable for a computer is that the computers today are very good at following rules. They are not very good at intuitive thinking. So they cannot think like humans. So if your fundamental problem is one where a lot of judgment comes into play, right? For instance, an example is, and I'll give an example, right? So an example is, let's say I was just watching Premier League, is the tackle a foul, right? There are so many things that go into the tackle being a foul, and that's where your referee comes in, right? But an offside is something that a system can now judge, because an offside is very easy. You are behind the defender line. It is easy. You can put a machine to do the offside. Similarly, whether the ball has crossed the line is something the video can detect, right? But a lot of the other nuances, you still need the referee in between, right? So that's the way I would look at it, right? So there are certain roles which are heavily decision driven, as in judgment driven. So the moment it is judgment driven, it becomes much harder for the machines of today, the AI of today, to solve. It is possible 50 years down the line, we will be talking about what else should we do, right? And I have an answer for that, right? Obviously, then we will be a spacefaring race, and all the humans will be somewhere else, right? So then we obviously still need humans to go on the spaceship, right? If you can send a robots, then it doesn't make sense. But till that time, right, we still need humans to do the judgment-heavy jobs, right? For instance, do you want a robot to cut your heart, or do you want your expert doctor to cut your heart, right? So there will be roles which you will not automate, right? Even in those roles, there will be places where the machine can come in and give guidance, right? So if you are being operated upon, the AI can come in and say, here are 50 different operations that you have done in the past, and this is what you did, right? Now that is an augmentation. So you would also hear people talk about AI as an augmented intelligence, right? So you are, and the definition I use is making men and women Superman and Superwomen, right? So that now you have the ability to look at all your past and other people's experiences and everything in front of you, and with a combination of maybe, let's say, a smart glass or an augmented reality glass and all that, you can get all that information at your fingertips, right? It makes you do your judgment part of the role at a more efficient way, because you have more information, you can make a better judgment decision. But that's the only difference, right? So any problem you can automate. There will be certain aspects of the problem or a business process where automation applies. There will certainly be an aspect of the business where you still do not want to replace the human. So I would say the higher order business, the work, right, which is more thinking oriented, where somebody is recommending is creative, right? Yeah. Creative or design or judgment, those would still be humans. The rest, anything is amenable to this, right? Now there will be levels of degree, like everything else, there will be degrees of automation. Simplistic will be an RPA, and more complex will be AI.
Right. Yeah, I think this is also probably what it means when people say data-informed decision-making, all right, or
Correct.
data-led, as opposed to data-driven decision-making, which is a lot more towards assuming that everything can be decided, right? So data-informed. Now, when we talk about data-informed decision-making, the second part of the question that I was asking, right? What kind of understanding, both in terms of new skills that somebody needs, to say, how do I frame this context? What we want to solve, or what is the outcome that we would want as an organization, as a functional leader, as a business, and then hand it over to the data teams to say, can you help us make a decision on this by providing as much insights as you can, right? Framing that business problem.
Yeah.
What kind of things one should be looking out for and acquiring if they don't have it then?
Sure. So if you look at typical data analysis, right? So or data analytics in general, right? And AI is an enabler to some of these, right? So it has 4 types: right? Descriptive, diagnostics, predictive, and prescriptive, right? So descriptive is basically simply, what happened, what has happened in the past, which is your business intelligence, right? So somebody want to come and say, how was my store sale, right? For example, in Myntra, right? How was my last sale which happened? How was it? What collections were sold? Who bought what? What was the typical basket size? You want to know all of that so that when you make the next sale, right? You have to say, okay, how many collections do I do? I mean, did women sell better, men sell better, right? Were electronics selling better? All of those, right? So that's made of your analysis of what has happened, right? This is basically looking in the past and aggregating information and to come back and give me insights saying, these are the collections we sold, these styles we're selling, checks we're selling, and stripes we're not selling, things like that. So that is where AI and machine learning comes into an online e-commerce or fashion e-commerce, right? And some of this is simple, analytics and statistical modeling and data science, right? So very simple when you're saying looking at past history, past data, and they'll do it. Now, if you want to do more complex work there, instead of looking at my transactional data, which is saying, okay, how many styles sold, I look at actually what sold. So let's say, the yellow t-shirt sold, right? Round necks sell, V's were not selling. And I'm now trying to decide, given my new stats, so I look at the image of the style and say, which of these are going to sell? Now, that's a different way of framing the same problem. The first way of framing the problem is saying, look at the number of sales, the sale data, and say, no, style ID, or basically my SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sold this many, right? And I know some description of the SKU, right? It's a t-shirt, white in color, but Nike, so. Whereas now if I look at image, and I can bring back the t-shirt and look at the t-shirt and look at another t-shirt, which maybe a new supplier is giving me a new t-shirt, and say, does it look similar, right? Are there similarities? Are people going to like this style or this design? Now that is taking to the next level of prediction, right? So same problem, depending on your understanding, your background, and the ability to bring those technologies, you can frame it differently, right? And both are valuable, right? I'm not saying that one is better than the other, right? One is helping your business, right, decide how much to procure and what sort of materials to sell. Other one is helping your design team, right, your buyer team, to go and say how much to order for. Right? So so the second part of it in Myntra, we used to buy everything 6 months in advance, right? Minimum 6 months in advance. In fashion businesses like that, you would order at least 6 months to a year in advance for the products which are coming. Now you have no way of guessing what's the demand going to be, what people's styles are going to be. So that's where your prediction starts coming. You look at the fall collection last year and you predict the fall this year, or you look at some trends and you look at fall for last 4 years, and you look at what is happening in Milan, and you combine those things and say, looks like polka dots are selling, right? It's a data science trying to tell the fashion business how to do fashion, right? And of course, the other problem is that the fashion designers say, you have no idea of fashion, right? You are a data scientist. How are you telling me?
Going back to the creative elements, making decisions on that, leaving it to that.
Correct. But so that comes to the other point, right? Then the point is that you may also have to step into the shoes of your end consumer, right? You need to understand how they think about business, right? So, for instance, the point I said, the buyers are actually making the decision 6 months in advance, right? So they have nowhere. So it's a very difficult problem because you are, in fact, they are actually like futurists. They are actually predicting the future, and they are taking some big calls, right? They basically making some calls saying that no, polka dots are going to sell or big printed flower patterns are going to sell. So that's the call they are making. In some cases it works, in some cases it doesn't work. So what do? It's like betting in Vegas, right? So they hedge their bets. What they do, they look at history and say, okay, yeah, white t-shirts always sell, so I'll just buy a lot of white t-shirts. Yeah. But now I change my style a little bit. So that's where the business comes into play. Where you asked, how do I understand business versus how do I understand technology? So you still need the business analyst. That's the role of a business analyst, right? The business analyst understands the business, right? Or works with your designers and has an understanding of how the business operates. And the data scientist has to just work with the business analyst to say, okay, what is it that I can help you with? And the business analyst, can you pull out the records for last 6 sales and tell me what's the commonality? Now that's the scale of a data scientist or a data analyst.
Yeah. Yeah. No, right? that's a great example. I think that's also a good segue for us to take some of the audience questions that are coming in specifically around the roles, responsibilities, and also how do we acquire these skills, right? So picking up on the last thing that you mentioned, there is a role of a business analyst which continues to be there, and you're saying that now the data scientist will come and basically say, how can I help you from the questions that you have around the business parts of it, around your customer, around your products or whatever, right? Now, does it mean that the business analyst also should now start having enough understanding of how the data analytics will be used, what kind of data science techniques are required? May not be an expert, doesn't need to become a data scientist, but for the conversation to be meaningful, for the discussion, for each of them need to understand each other's language. Otherwise, you're talking, against each other, right? So, what level of understanding and what type of skills, if you will, in the context of data skills, right, are required for, let's say, people in business analyst roles, number one, and what we saw from the audience, some of them are also project managers, right, and engineering managers, functional leaders, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's take business analyst, right? Business analyst is a very strategic role, right? Typically, I would put a business analyst as somebody who, in India, everybody's an engineer. So it would be an engineer, but it need not be an engineer also, right? It could be a fantastic,
somebody understands that domain quite well.
But it would be largely a business, functionally business owner. Somebody who owns the business or somebody who enables the business owner to run the business, right? Typically, you would expect a business analyst to have at least some sort of a business administration degree, like an MBA, right? So the bigger the organization, you find an MBA playing the business analyst role, or sometimes they call it offering lead roles, right? It varies. Business analyst is not a often used term anymore. People tend to use other terms, right? So as you said, titles have become very fancier, but essentially they are somebody who is looking at the business from the P&L perspective, largely the P&L perspective, right? They're looking at P&L and saying this, or they are helping the P&L owner decide the strategy, right? Build the strategy, saying this is what works for me, this doesn't work for me, this is what my competition is doing, etc., right? So their role remains the same, right? Now, to make those decisions, they were using data always, right? In the past, the data they were using was minimal. It was Excel sheets and spreadsheets, and somebody from the finance would give some sheets, some buyer would give something, and they would probably sit together, create all these different sheets and figure out something, right? They will create some pie charts and Harvey balls and all that. Now the volume of data is much huge, right? So your Excel sheets are not going to help you. That is where they will come to the data science team and say, look, now I have this last year sale data, right? And we sold 1 billion SKUs. You tell me what's selling, right? What you tell us, and I have 100 categories. Now, for each category, I need to know which is the SKU which is selling. Now, that's something you cannot do in Excel sheet. That's where your data science comes into play. You're looking for patterns, you're looking seasonality, and a lot more variations, right? So they will start coming and saying, I want to understand seasonality. I want to see if holiday season is different. I want to see summer is different. So they will keep asking you the business problems, right? They did not, and they know the data is available. They know that the trends are in the data. So that much they should be available, knowing. Right? So data scientists will say, yeah, do you have the data? So you'll say, yeah, I have the data from the sales. Can you use that? And yeah, of course I have. And maybe they will say, okay, what should I buy? Then you say, and I want to actually ship it in the next day. So there is a problem coming in again, right? My competitor is doing next day shipping. I am doing 5-day shipping. How can I improve that, right? So, okay, then how many warehouses do you have, right? Where are your people buying from? So it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue.
It's more of bringing in those questions that business analysts always used to ask, but now asking the data team or specifically data scientists to help them, give answers more in terms of a predictive way, if possible. What will happen potentially, right? What has happened is one story. What might happen in the future? Both,
right? So I can give an example, right? So for instance, at Myntra, one of the I used to also manage the logistics. So one of the problems that we used to have is every 11 months you have to pick the the distributions, the DCs. Typically, it's a short-term rental, so you have to change those because the owner will be a little finicky and say somebody else is paying more, so you have to change. And typically, picking up a new location, because it's a running business, right? It's like changing the tires on a running car. You have to still pick the DC while your deliveries are happening. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks for people to sit down, come to a meeting, look at all the locations. Now, Dombivli East, Dombivli West, and all of that, or Bangalore. If you are in Whitefield, you cannot do delivery in Hebal, right? So you need to figure this out. So there is a lot of that information that comes into play. So they used to take about 3 to 4 weeks to decide a new location, right? So what we did is I and my analyst, we actually looked at the data. We looked at also where the demand was coming in from the region, right? In the most recent weeks or months. So we know who is ordering, from which zip codes orders were coming, right? And now the DC team would come and say, we have 3 locations which we think are available. We can go and talk to the owner and get this place. Can you tell us which is the optimal one for us? So now it became an optimality problem versus can I go and talk to the owner, right? So that problem they would not have solved with any technology, right? You need to look at where the orders are coming, how many people are going to deliver, and you want to do delivery, so many deliveries in an hour. So it's an optimality problem, right? Your optimization problem. So you're now coming and saying, what is the maximum number of zip codes I can cover from each of these locations? And we will pick and say, and it's typically on a dashboard. They get to see it. So they go in and everybody sits in the room, and within a day, they decide which is the location. So from 3 to 4 weeks, in a day, they are picking the new DC. And they know exactly, if I pick the DC, what is my service level going to be? So now that has completely transformed the business. Right?
Yeah.
So some of it is also data science going and pushing and saying, look, if you give me this data, I can do this little bit extra. I can start predicting how your service levels are. Right? So that will only come, 2 things will happen, right? One, they'll start trusting the data science team, that they understand, data science understands the business. It takes some time. So the first day you go and tell this, nobody's going to listen. So it's a trust building exercise between these 2 teams. But eventually data science can impact the business.
No, absolutely. So essentially, if you're coming from the responsibilities of helping P&L owners or business stakeholders answer some very key business questions, your understanding of analytics and also some data science skills is going to be absolutely useful to make your job effective and as well as make those outcomes effective, right? And one of the reasons why we saw in the poll that people are curious and interested and wanting to know more about data science is to make their job more effective, right? So this is number 1. Now, obviously, there are lots of places where people can go and acquire these skills today, right? So this is an area where it's proliferated everywhere, and some good, some not so good. What is the best way you think? And it's a good question that comes from Hemal, who's asking this, right? And Hemal asks, how much difference is there in real world working conditions, as a data scientist from what we learn from these data science programs or courses that we do, right? And my approach and my suggestion across in other contexts has always been that it is not just enough to acquire the knowledge, right? There's a difference between being aware of it, being literate in it, being knowledgeable in it, and having the skill to do it, right? So having the skill to do it is where I need to emphasize, and hence knowing is not enough, doing is required, right? So what are your thoughts on what kind of approach that they should take when upskilling? in this?
Yeah, so I will use a soccer analogy, right, or a cricket analogy if people want, right? I mean, everybody can play soccer and cricket. I mean, in India, everybody knows how to play cricket, right? But you cannot be a Sachin Tendulkar without practicing, right? So just because I know how to bowl or a bat doesn't mean I will become. Or forget Sachin Tendulkar. I know you put me in an IPL team and I can go and hit a six. It doesn't work like that, right? I know everything about cricket. I know every the rules. I know how to hit the ball,
That's
and I even play well, right?
Yeah.
Right. So in my own, let's say the academic background could be seen as I am playing in my backyard with my friends. I'm a great six hitter. The moment I go to the ground, everything changes. There's like a lot of people, a lot of expectations, right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same even in data science, right?
The follow-up, the follow-up on that would be, I would say, I mean, follow-up question that could come up is, for us to practice enough, there needs to be an opportunity, right? Now, of course, not everybody has that opportunity within their current working setup, maybe.
Correct.
But I always again encourage people to say that if you are learning something in some context, in some place, find a mechanism or find a context which makes you do those things, right? A hands-on learning approach as you learn those things. Work on projects, work on volunteer projects, bring your own projects to the table. So learning by doing is the better approach.
Correct. So I will also add this, right? So I think it's also not knowing your strengths and weaknesses, right? And focus on strengths. I always tell people, there are a lot of people who say, understand your weakness, improve your weakness. I am slightly different. I will say you identify your strengths and work on your strengths, improve your strengths, right?
Leverage
so if your strength, if your strength is in framing business problems, then you want to go towards the business side, right? If your strength is looking at data, mining data, right? You are very good. I mean, reasonably good in math. Then you want to do data science, right? So there is, or maybe you are very good at programming, right? Then you can also become a engineer, a data engineer. That is the role which has come, right? Where you're not applying so many of the algorithms, but you actually bringing the pipeline. And just to make it very clear, right? A lot of data science, 60-70% of the time in a data science project is all about getting the data right, clearing it properly, making sure the pipelines are working fine. And the data engineering role is more important than the data scientist role. So when I say data science is the algorithmic role, because that's a very small percentage of the effort that goes into a successful product, right? You pick one algorithm, you train it, and then that's it, your model is ready, but you need the data to come in continuously. So the data engineering is a more longer term, more in the trenches role than an algorithm, the science. What has happened is that depending on the size of the organization, you might have a data engineering team. So your role, it becomes specialized. But the smaller the organization, the data scientist is also doing data engineering. And which is where people suddenly will, when they go into the real world, they realize that, it was not as nice as when I went to academia, because when you go and take a course, you get these toy data sets, right? Ready-made data sets are given to you, you run your algorithm, you get your output, everything looks fine. When you go into the real world, the guy says, here is my database. Now you figure out productivity, right? Now you'll take the data, you have to clean it up. There will be some missing data and information there. You go and talk to different departments and find out how do you fill this missing information. And you can say, but when I went to college, it was all about applying random forest and deep learning. Nobody told me how to prepare the data. And I have seen that, honest side. I mean, some of my team members in the past have told me, but this is not my role. I used to always get the data, and I used to tell me, but you are only 3 people here, or we are only 5 people. Who will give the data to me? The business guy is not going to give the data, right?
Absolutely.
So sometimes that is the challenge when the real world, right? Real world, you have to do everything that has to be done. Right?
So what you're saying is doing some program in data science will help you understand, help you learn those specific techniques and tools. But when you have to apply them in the context, you often get the easiest part to do. The toughest part is the data wrangling, data cleansing, data preparation, and you have a data set ready and you're applying those, and you think that so you're saying that no, try and understand and get your hands dirty in the entire workflow. You might be in context and say, so this also answers one of the questions that came in the chat box or Q&A box about, look, I've learned all these things, but I'm not getting an opportunity in the real companies to work, because what I have to showcase doesn't seem to be the same as what is the expectation in the company, right? So so your advice essentially is, while the data science techniques are all important, don't ignore the other aspects that precede that, or even after that. The after that part is also the decision making part, right? So that is for, you know, you might be in a situation, you know, if you're a functional manager, senior engineering manager, or some business manager, you are expected to make certain decisions, right? Either in the context of products or projects. So have that spectrum and you know, learn those competencies in that area. And the way that you do that is demonstrate, you know, work on projects and ability to demonstrate to that part, right? Super. So I think I see a few questions related to the data science and business analytics program. I will leave it to the team to the end, where they will spend 5 minutes explaining them about the program itself. But one more question probably we can take from folks who are asking, right? From the roles point of view, again, let's stay away from the titles. The question is, if you look at the companies that are technology services companies, tech product companies which uses technology, you know, I wish this person had actually given their name. It says anonymous attendee, but I think it's a very relevant question, right? Non-product technology enabled. I don't know what that means, but let's focus on the two parts, right? Technology services companies like maybe Accenture or some TCS or Infosys, and product companies that use technologies, right? What are the typical roles that you see in a data team, right? What kind of responsibilities exist in this part?
Yeah. So in the product, so I think the data team remains the same. It doesn't matter whether it is a services organization or a product organization, right? Because ultimately, in both the algorithms are being used to certain activity, right? So in one.
Sorry to interrupt in that question. Where does the product manager fit in that context?
Okay. Yeah. So if it's a services, typically when I think the question was around services organization which is not doing product. Sure. If it is not doing products, right, it's just essentially just enabling capability enablement, which is like staff augmentation, to make it very crude, then you don't need a product manager, because the product manager is with your client, right? So there is always a product manager. The answer to the question is there is always a product manager. It's just, where is the product manager, right? So many times when you are becoming, so in the services organization, you become part of a team which is actually owning the product, because its client is owning the product or the offering. Then the offering lead or the product manager is sitting there and they are deciding how that is going to be. Now, if you're in a product organization, obviously you own the product, you own what is going to go in. So the product manager becomes part of this organization. But in either case, there is a product manager. It just, is it in this organization or the other organization? But in the entire service delivery or in the business process transformation which is happening, if there is a product or there is a sort of a software as a service even going in, as a software piece going in, whether it's a product or not, there will be somebody who owns that offering, right? In some cases, they'll be called as product managers. In some cases, they'll be called as a business owner, business manager, etc. But it only works in a product company, right? If product-oriented offerings, if you're simply building a dashboard, you don't really need a product manager. That is the business, the BI, right? Yeah. The business analyst will come in and your data science is not really relevant. These are only when you're actually offering a service like what I said, the KYC automation, right? Now that's the product you're going to offer, right? And you put it into that pipeline where some driver is uploading the document. Now your product is going to sit in between and take that document through the processing and give the output back. So now you are part of the process, but it is a separate offering. Maybe it's a SaaS offering. But you need a product owner or a product manager to manage that, right? So that's the difference.
So the composition typically remains the same, especially from the person who brings the business context or driving the product. Depends on whether they are part of your team or some external team.
Correct.
Right? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Olas and Dr. Olas. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Great insights today. And hopefully we've answered most of the questions. Now, I know there are few that have remained unanswered because I didn't bring into it, which were related to the future of, how this is evolving, landscape and all of that. That probably for another day, another discussion. But appreciate your time on a Saturday evening. I did not know that there was another IPL running somewhere else, which is obviously a lot more popular, than this one. So maybe we should. But before we go away, I want to hand this off to Jayant, who will provide 5 minutes, overview of the data science and business analytics program. But again, thank you so much, Olas.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. The School of Data Science at the Institute offers multiple programs in data science, business analytics, data analytics, and applied data science. The international certification in data science and business analytics is a 5 months off-campus program with weekly live sessions, and which kind of the program has been designed to help people acquire skills in data analytics, business analytics, and for people who are looking at building data-related skills to use in their current job. And the way this particular program has been designed is that people with absolutely no prior coding experience can also benefit from the program. The pedagogy and the curriculum has been designed in such a way to deliver these 10 learning outcomes. It starts right from the building the business problems as data science problems, like what Mr. Olas and Professor Sai discussed earlier. One of the key aspects of any data science project is about how you kind of frame these business problems, and getting with the right business problem is one of the key challenges in any data science projects today. So it starts with building those skills in the learners to building the required skill sets and building the right portfolio and demonstrable assets to accelerate your career. That's the outcomes for which you're kind of looking at joining this particular program. So it builds on the business problem framing, and then it delves deep into the different methods of data extraction, the different models which can be used to kind of solve these business problems, and then come up with actionable insights which you can present to your business teams through their visualization and storytelling. So these are the 10 different outcomes on which the program focuses on. If you look at the program, it is a 5-month program with 5 different courses. It starts with the data science foundations, where we kind of build on the basics of statistics and Excel and SQL aspects, which are kind of required for any data science role. And then we kind of delve deep into the business problem framing. That is one of the courses which kind of talks about how do you frame a business problem, look at the data sources, which can be used to solve those business problems. And then the data science techniques, predictive and prescriptive analytics. And the last part is how do you kind of present your findings, your insights, so in using visualizations and using storytellings in a business compelling way, and build your business case with your stakeholders. So each course runs for 4 weeks. So it has got a mix of digital learning or self-paced learning with live guided sessions every week. And each course has got multiple assignments, and each course focuses on a capstone project, which will help you in building your demonstrable assets, the assets which is required for you to showcase your skills to prospective companies. The hiring managers today look for these portfolios than your resume. So the focus is on building those demonstrable assets through the capstone projects and the assignments. So this is the overview of the core courses. These are the 5 courses which we discussed earlier. In addition to this, anybody interested in getting deep into any specific topic like product analytics and metrics, if you're coming from a product management background, or if you're a marketing person looking at getting deeper skills in social and web analytics, or anything to do with marketing analytics, or getting an understanding on digital product management and on the aspects of how the entire product is managed, the different metrics that is measured, and getting an overall understanding of how these digital products are managed. So you can look at these additional courses which are offered. So one of the unique propositions of the programs at the Institute is the Career Persistence platform. So we kind of connect the learners with, or our alumni with hiring managers, and we help the learners build their portfolios, and they kind of go through these sessions where we help them prepare their resumes, the portfolios, and prepare for these interviews through our career labs and career club platforms. So we are offering a limited scholarship as part of this particular program. If people are interested in availing this scholarship, you can scan the QR code. And if you further want to discuss more about the program and want to understand this in detail, you can talk to our counselors. You can scan the QR code to book a session with one of our counselors. With that, I would like to thank all of you for your participation. Thank you, Professor Sai Satish and Mr. Olas Nambiar, for taking the time off of your busy schedule to share your valuable insights. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you once again, and have a great evening.